you a co-host. Susie, just in case. Okay, I don't have option to make you a co-host, but I think everything will be fine. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining.
Welcome.
Yeah, super excited for this webinar. Just to kind of start things off, I'll do a little bit of an introduction of myself for those of you who don't know me and Colibri Garden, and then I'll introduce Susie and then we'll kick things off. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mags. I live in Santa Elena, Colombia. I'm originally from the UK. I'm a writer. I'm also do a lot of work with sacred medicines, most of all Jahe, but have been studying other medicines as well. And I'm also a plant medicine integration specialist and a facilitator with Colibri Garden. So with Colibri Garden, we collaborate with Indigenous wisdom keepers and traditionally trained facilitators to facilitate sacred medicine retreats and ceremonies in an authentic, safe, and supportive setting. And on the call today, we also have Ivailo, who is the founder of Colibri Garden. Ivailo, I don't know if you want to say a few words, or you're a bit full of mambe.
Everybody, my name is Ivailo. I'm the founder of Colibri Garden, and we collaborate closely with Max. And yeah, very happy to be here. Very happy to be here with Susie. Susie is part of the family with which we do the San Pedro and Sweat Lodge ceremonies. We've also done many kambo sessions with them. And well, I'll let Susie talk more about herself and introduce herself. But I just thought that it's a very interesting topic that it's important to know about. And I'm very happy to be here. You know, like I'm not an expert on the topic, but I very much hope to learn some new things. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ivailo. So, of course, we also have Susanna Karollys with us on the call as well, who is going to be sharing all of this amazing wisdom and expertise on the topic of cycle regulation, women's health, hormonal balance, and especially using natural methods. So just to introduce Susie, she is a mother of 3 beautiful daughters. She is a midwife trained in Indigenous methods. She's a holistic reproductive health practitioner and an educator on the symptothermal method for fertility awareness. As Ivailo mentioned, she's also a plant medicine ceremonial leader and a kambo facilitator as well. And Susie carries a wealth of knowledge around natural medicines and methods for women's health and well-being. So just before we kind of kick things off, we're going to have a Q&A with Susie, and then we're also going to make some time at the end for any questions that you guys might have as participants. So if you have any questions coming up while we're talking, take a note of those and we'll make sure that we try and get to them at the end. But yeah, I would love, Susie, for you to kind of, if there's anything more you want to share with us about yourself, and also anything you can share with us about what brought you to this work, supporting women in these processes, in fertility, in pregnancy and birth, and everything surrounding that.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this beautiful opportunity to sit down and talk for a bit about these themes that are highly important to all of us, really, as women and also for men. Happy that Ivailo's here as a token masculine to accompany this conversation. And yeah, well, apart from what Max already introduced about me, I was born in Sweden. And I grew up in Sweden. I'm from the university education. I'm a political scientist. And that was my line of work, what I imagined that I would be doing for all of my youth and early 20s. Then I left for South America when I was like 18, maybe. And about that time, everything in my world perception started changing. And there was a few years where I still thought I would be working in important international organizations and political themes and post-conflict and peacekeeping and whatever that I brought from like my academic studies. And then I fell in love with medicine and fell in love with life and biology and biochemistry and especially I would say with the female body. So then for me, it's been like a very personal process. Of course, I grew up in Sweden. I started having contraceptives when I was like 13, 14 maybe, because that was the way of things. Like I went for one of my first gynecologist visits and they gave me the pill. And yeah, because I said I had a boyfriend. So then I started having contraceptives. I think I went through all of the different hormonal methods there are during several years, all of my youth, basically from 13 until 23, with very little consciousness about my biological functions and processes. I had absolutely no idea how my body worked, what I was doing with the contraceptives. I had absolutely no idea how they worked. And then when I was about 20 something, and I was in South America, I started realizing that I had a lot of physical issues. Of course, I had no period. I was like bloated and I wouldn't say fat, but I was a lot bigger than I am today. I was drastically depressed at several times. Even throughout my youth, I had moments of like suicidal thoughts and all kinds of mental and emotional issues that I never put in context with what I was consuming. Not with the contraceptives and not with food. Like in this bubble of that things are just like this. This is what I live in. And then when I was about 22, 23, I met my partner, who's Due. And at that time, I had passed from the hormonal contraceptives to the copper, what's it called? Uterine device, intrauterine device. And when I met Due, and he asked me about like, yeah, we were already having relations, and he said, "So are you like on the pill or something?" And I told him I had this device, and he was like, "That's weird. Maybe you should take it out." And about that time, I started realizing that all of the things that I had been living up until then could have something to do with all of the horrible experiences that I've had in my youth. I decided to remove the device, and suddenly my body started talking. And I was very interested to learn how to understand it. And that was like the point of starting this journey of understanding life and understanding the human body, especially the female body, which I still today am like completely, this is my everyday study. I have my degree and my specialization and everything, but I don't stop learning. It's every day I keep learning new things because this is extremely complex. We have amazingly complex bodies. And on that path, a few years later, I got pregnant with my first daughter, who's now 7 years old. And that was another like wild eye opener. Like everything that happens within our bodies for us to sustain life and to be able to give birth to another human being, it's enormous. And that was the point of getting into midwifery, because also during the pregnancy, I was sure from the beginning that I had no intention of going to give birth in the hospital. And that's when I met my midwifery masters. And I then started working with them during when I was pregnant with Aini. I started accompanying them to other births and in consultations and studying with them and learning. And I realized that all of the things that I've done before, like all of my super important political studies, was not at all what I wanted to be doing. And that's when I started, to educate myself on with several different types of formation and educations to become a traditional midwife. And that's the best decision that I've taken in my life. It's the most beautiful job there is. The traditional path of midwifery is very ritual. It's very much based on knowledge of plant medicine, and not only the ancestral medicines, as we know, like wachuma and yahe and peyote, but also all different herbs with different types of uses, and a lot about knowing how to use food as a medicine. And yeah, that's a big rabbit hole to go down, you know. When I gave birth to my second daughter, a few years later, she's now 4, I was working as a midwife, but I felt like I was not completely satisfied with the knowledge that I had from traditional midwifery. It's huge and it's immense and it's beautiful. But also, I mean, I come from a very academic reality, and I needed another support to understand the processes that I was seeing in the families that came for me to accompany their process of pregnancy and birth. I was seeing things that I couldn't explain with traditional tools. So I decided to get more meat on my bones. And I found this program with Justice International. That's where I got my specialization as a holistic reproductive health practitioner. And that's like a line of thought that's very much from functional and integrative medicine. So now I finished the formation 3 years ago, and now I feel like I'm on 2 legs. You know, I have the traditional midwifery and very much like natural tools and ritual tools, and knowing how to work with mind and emotion from that perspective. And my other leg is holistic medicine from a modern perspective. And these go hand in hand. You know, all the time I see like, right, that's what you do with this ritual, you know. So yeah, that's where I am today. After this long journey of destructuralizing my very Western mind, which I was like brought up in. It's been a long journey, but I'm so excited and happy about being at the spot where I am now, because I feel like I understand my body and I understand most of the physical processes that I see in the people that come to work with me. I've learned another language, and that's the tool that I want to share with you in this moment, that we can have a short conversation around what it means, what are the like integrative parts of this language. And of course, as I said, it's a rabbit hole. There are several rabbit holes along this conversation. We could dive into so many different trains of thought, but we'll try to cover as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a beautiful journey, and I totally agree. You know, it's one of those things where there are so many different directions we could take it in, and yeah, so many different areas that we could cover in this conversation. But I would like to start with kind of like looking at the roots of all of these imbalances that we're seeing, you know, like putting on this webinar. We obviously really wanted to be able to share your wisdom and explore these topics with you as an expert, but it was also kind of a response to many conversations that I've been having with women in my life and just been hearing again and again and again, you know, oh, I don't have a period. My period is irregular. I have super painful periods. People, you know, with problems getting pregnant, or even, you know, women later in life really struggling to kind of understand what's going on in their bodies when it comes to menopause and things like that. It's at all stages of the woman's life that we're finding these imbalances in our reproductive system. So I want to ask you, Susie, what do you think are the roots of all of these problems that we're seeing today that seem to be just kind of like on the rise in modern societies?
There are many. I would say to understand it, we first have to understand like what's really what is really our reproductive health, you know, because we're also very much brought into an understanding of life where reproductive health, which is everything that kind of like belongs to the uterus, you know, like my menstrual cycle, my period, my pains, and my fluctuations, my hormonal imbalances. It's like put apart, you know, as if it wouldn't really be a part of your general health. And very much so, when I speak to people who've been, of course, the first they go to the doctor, you know, first they have a problem, they have painful periods, or they have excessive bleeding, or they don't have a period, or whatever. And from the medical system, it's like, yeah, you know, that's what happens. People who have uteruses, it's painful, you know, and and even very often people get recommended to have an hysterectomy if they have too painful periods, or if they have endometriosis, or whatever issue that's difficult to live with. They get recommended either to actually have a hysterectomy to get their uterus removed, which is a little bit like thinking, well, all people who have legs, you know, it's painful to have legs, better cut them off. It doesn't make sense, you know. And then the second option, if you don't want to have your uterus removed, then your other option is to go on contraceptives for the rest of your life, basically. Because from the medical perspective and in like the modern medicine world, there is no understanding of tying the reproductive health back into general health, where it belongs. All of these symptoms that we see with regards to the menstrual cycle and our hormonal processes, they have foundations, you know. It's not just because, it's never just because that you get endometriosis, or you have like how do you say, polycystic ovaries, or you have painful periods, or whatever. It's never just because. It's not just like, oh, my body's like that, you know. And people tend to say, no, I'm very well, I'm super healthy, and only when I get my period, I'm in bed for 3 days with the migraine. And that's not true, you know. If you have to be in bed for 3 days and have all sorts of medications to be able to go through your hormonal processes, then you're not healthy. And that's the first thing that we have to understand, that the menstrual cycle is an expression of our health. And it's actually an amazing tool that we have as women, because men who are below this, like they have the same conditions for health in this modern world that is quite crazy. Many of the times they get a lot sicker because they don't see it before. We have the option to understand and study our menstrual cycle, because that's where everything is expressed. All of the different imbalances and problems that may be going on in our body, not in our uterus. Many of the times it's in our intestines, it's in our liver, it's in our kidneys, it's in our thyroid, you know. But no tengo idea. ¿Está con la bebé? Sorry. ¿Tú puedes ayudar?
All good.
Yeah. Sorry, the father is lost. What was I saying?
You were
It's
saying how men get a
yeah,
lot sicker because they don't have the same indicators.
yeah, they don't have the same indicators. What we have the option to understand the language that our menstrual cycle is expressing. And why is the menstrual cycle the like arrowhead of expression? Because that's our survival as a species. If we have a lacking health, we are not prepared to carry life. And that's why these processes are so delicate. Ovulation is super delicate, menstruation is delicate. And everything that's behind ovulation and menstruation, that are like the foundation for being able to become pregnant and bring forward life on this planet. If the foundation is not well, then the point of expression is going to be in the menstrual cycle. So now we see in this modern crazy world where we live, a lot of problems related to reproductive health because of this. Things that maybe we don't have other symptoms yet, you know, but where we first see the symptoms is going to be in relation to our menstrual cycle and the reproductive health. So first we have to understand that. And then we have to understand that our body is a biological program. We are very like individualized in our body and think of ourselves as me, Susanna, in this body. I like eating this and that. I love cake. I like whatever example we could make. I like staying up until 3 a.m. I don't like having breakfast, or whatever that might be, like our personal decisions around how we want to live our life. But our body is not individual. Our body is a program, and it needs to attend to the laws of physical biochemical nature. So all of our decisions that may be very personal, like, yeah, I'm gonna stay up until 4 a.m. and I'm gonna have pizza for breakfast. That's going to have serious effects on the biological program that this is. It's not made for a life with the conditions that we have at this moment. We are completely regulated by light and darkness, by times of the day, when we eat, what we eat at that time, you know. And we're completely regulated by our microbiome that's formed by what we eat. You know, we give food to bacteria that live in our intestines and in all of our body, and it's a food that's not digestible for these populations. And that's going to start creating a problem within this organism that is our body. So in the modern era, where we have abundance of pharmaceutical medicines, antibiotics, a very like disconnected medical view of the body, that we tend to specialize. You know, if I have a problem in my stomach, then I have to go to the gastrointestinal expert, and the gastrointestinal expert has no understanding of my uterus, you know. Or if I suddenly get a liver issue, I have to go to somebody who can attend my liver issue, but that person doesn't know about the intestines. Also, this is a part of the problem. You know? So we have abundance of pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, contraceptives. We have extreme abundance of highly processed foods, and that are not nutritious and that are full of toxins. You know? We have extreme cases of intoxication and inflammation. I would say, I'm guessing now, but I would say like 95% of the people who live in modern societies have some degree of intoxication and inflammation in the body. It's impossible not to, because we no longer have access to clean food. It's very difficult to find clean options for feeding ourselves. So we are also in a situation where we have abundance of food, abundance of food, but we're not nurtured. So we're undernourished and we're overfed. And within that like circle of things, we also consume extreme amounts of different endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors come in many, many shapes and forms. Like the first one we can think of is contraceptive pills and all of the other hormonal methods for contraception. Because that's really like the clear example. The point of using contraceptives is to disrupt the endocrine process so that we cannot become pregnant. That's the like number one endocrine disruptor. And apart from that, all of the different like additives to food, agrotoxins, antibiotics that are applied to animals and to cattle and to chicken and goes through the eggs and everything. So that all of the food that we consume have really high amounts of endocrine disruptors and antibiotics. So we as a population at this moment, we're in a very tricky position because we're seeing a lot of effects already. And it's very difficult to get to the root cause because it's so like involved in our way of life. Baby. Hello, Cody.
Hey, Cody.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
This is the third one. Baby. Yeah, so basically, and we also with our modern way of life, there are two more things that are extremely relevant, which is the extreme alterations of our microbiome that's going to affect all of the processes in our bodies, because that's where we get nutrition. We cannot get nutrition if we don't have a beneficial microbiome. And that's a balance that we need to attend to. If we don't have a balanced microbiome, then we are not going to be able to sustain all of the different baby. Mira. We're not going to be able to sustain all of the different metabolic processes that we need to sustain our hormonal process. Because the hormonal processes are just one piece that goes into this complex program that we are as human bodies. So that's one extreme point that we need to attend to quickly. And the other huge aspect is stress that comes in so many shapes and forms. We have work-related stress, study-related stress, emotional stress, mental stress, and biochemical stress. Yeah, so biochemical stress would be something that's generated in your body when you're eating foods or consuming products that alter the balance. That leads to biological stress. And finally, in the end, the cells of our body, they don't care about from where the stress comes. They don't care if it's that we have a lot to do at work, or it's that we're eating a food that we're really allergic to. You know? In the cell, it's going to be the same thing, and that is oxidative damage. And that's finally, in the end, that's what's going to kill us all, you know? It's going to be generated one way or another. But with the high amounts of stress that we have from our environment, from unclean waters, from unclean air, from pollution, from agrotoxins, from food additives, from all types of things that are an integrative part of our reality and are really difficult to escape, we have a very serious situation. So that we're seeing a lot of menstrual cycle dysregulations, it's not at all weird. And still we're like in a mindset where we don't like connect the dots. Like, I've always had these terrible cramps, or now suddenly I have like excessive bleedings, or suddenly I don't get my period. And we think it's like something hormonal that's just switched, you know? Before that something hormonal just switched, there's a lot of damage that we've already generated. And that's where we have to like place ourselves in this moment and open our eyes to what the life that we have created in modern society is extremely toxic to our own survival. Yeah.
Oof, yeah. Thank you, Susie. It's a lot, but it's just, man, it's so true. Like I'm thinking if there was a period in my life, maybe like 4 years ago, I'd been on the pill continuously since the age of 18. And I decided to come off the pill, and it was almost a year and a half with no period. And during that period of me being off the pill but not bleeding, I was vegan. So like no shade to vegans if it works for you, but like for me in that moment, now with the hindsight looking back, it wasn't working for me. And I was also doing intense CrossFit training, like 5 to 6 days a week. And surprise, surprise, I had no period. And I went to the gynecologist and she sent me for these blood tests. And she looked at the results and she said, yeah, both your estrogen and your progesterone levels are really low. So the solution is either you have to go on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, or go back on the pill. And I thought, oh, well, I don't want to go back on the pill because I was kind of like, you know, there were things about the pill that were happening in my body and like psychological well-being that I wasn't happy with. So I said, let's try this HRT. And then I just like completely inflated, like got super bloated, was like really, really puffy and really didn't feel good on that either. So I came off that and she said, okay, well, then you have to go back on the pill. So then I didn't know, I didn't have this information. I didn't have these tools. You know, carried on being vegan for a while, carried on training super hard, carried on in my stressful job at a PR agency, not making any of these links that you're talking about. And then eventually, you know, I think it was like maybe a year or year and a half after that, I decided to stop the pill completely and like start this process of trying to, you know, get my regular cycles back. But as you know, like it's been a battle and it's still, I'm still having, you know, these irregularities. So it's definitely a process. And I think, you know, for me and probably for other people, when we hear all of these things about how contaminated everything is that we're constantly consuming and like really how difficult it is to find pure and uncontaminated like foods and even things like, you know, like shampoos and soaps and these kinds of products as well, you know, we don't know the impact that they're having. But just for somebody who is kind of like ready to start taking these steps to regulate their reproductive system, but is obviously still living in this modern society, you know, we're not all able to just go and kind of like go off grid and live in the jungle and grow all of our own food. What sort of like practical steps, methods, and natural tools would you recommend people kind of start to introduce in order to reduce the impact of all of these things that you've been talking about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when we paint it up in the scenario that we're at, it's like, oh my God, we're never getting out of this situation. But that's not true. That's not true. There are so many things that we can do. I would say each person have to start like looking through where they are and what are the main like what are the main what do you say, like weights that they're carrying in their biological life, no? Because there might be many, but if we manage to identify the three main aspects that are heavy for our body, then that's a huge step, no? So for a person maybe who's on the pill and who loves eating fried food and loves drinking vodka every weekend, then that would be quite easy to like, okay, I'm gonna go off the pill. I'm gonna start cooking my own food from scratch, and I'm going to get down on my alcohol consumption. No, so these are like three examples. No? There may be many different examples, and in the end, it's like, yeah, I understand it. ¿Ya puedes llevar donde tu papá? Por favor, no sé.
Estaba viendo las cobijas.
Yeah, it's about understanding. There's a very nice image that we use a lot in where I studied, justice, which is a camel that's carrying like a shitload of weight, you know. And on what's on his back, there are like, you know, their books and their like work things, and there may be like fried food, and there is a cigarette, and there is a wine bottle and things on the weight on the camel's back, you know. And that's something that we would use to explain like what you need to do to make the process more easy for your body is to take the weight off the camel's back. So then you start taking things out. Like, okay, so if you realize many times we always know when we do things that are not so good for us, you know. We sit down and then decide like, okay, these are my three main weights that are being very heavy on my camel's back. If you start taking them out one by one, with each thing that you take out, your body regains more energy and regains more vital support to go through the processes that we need to sustain our biological life. So yeah, the first few steps are always like that. If you're on medication that maybe you don't really need, because most of the medication that we are that are used, like the pharmaceutical medications, they're just for stopping symptoms, for hiding symptoms. They don't really go to the root cause of the problem. Very rarely. There might be a few that does, but most of the medications that I know, they don't, you know? And that's not positive, because then we only hide what's been the issue. And contraceptive endocrine disruptors, they're the main example, because the pill is never going to be able to regulate your menstrual cycle. It's impossible, because what the pill does to function is to stop your menstrual cycle, to freeze the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, to think that we've already ovulated and that they don't have to do anything else. Then you stop your own endocrine process in order to create the illusion that you've regulated your menstrual cycle. And that's still like sold to people as the solution. That's not fair. It's not fair with women. it creates so many more problems, because when you put that lid on top and think like, finally I have a beautiful 28-day cycle, and my bleeding is really light and it's not painful, and I don't have acne and I don't get headaches, I'm fine, you know? Below that illusion, everything that was at the root cause of those issues are still developing and becoming more and more severe by the day. So that would be like the first steps that I always recommend is like, okay, so if you're on a medication that's hiding something from you, hiding a symptom through this illusion, then get off it so that we can see what's really going on. And of course, it's super difficult to clean up your nourishment. It's also very expensive, because then, okay, so I'm gonna get organic vegetables, I'm gonna have to find my local farmer and to get my raw milk, and to get organic grass-fed beef and meat and chicken and free range, you know, it's a job. and it's difficult. So then maybe you start with a few things, you know, you get the organic eggs, you go see if you can find a farmer around that you can get raw milk. You start a little place to plant vegetables, you know, to get a little bit of change, because we're at the point where just a little bit of change notices makes a huge difference in our body, because what we do with that is to take weight off. Also, it's super important for us to understand as women that our nutrition requirements are much different and much bigger than men. There are so many arguments around, of course, like the meat industry is terrible, and there's no way to defend it. And that's like many people decide to become vegetarian because they don't want to be part of that shit industry, and that's super understandable. But really, the people who can really handle and be well with a vegetarian diet are men who sit still, men at the offices. They can be completely fine having broccoli and like eggs, you know? They can be completely fine with that. As women, we have different requirements. We should bleed every month. And that's super important for the rest of our organism. It's not just uterine bleeding, you know? There's so much behind what needs to happen for us to bleed every month. If we don't have the nourishment to be able to ovulate in the time that it is, then we are going to create a disbalance of hormone, where we have maybe a dominance of estrogen, and then we have very little progesterone, and then we have irregular bleedings, and then that's going to shift all of the balances in our body, because our reproductive health is not in our uterus. These reproductive hormones, they work in all cells of our body. There are receptors for estrogen and progesterone in all of the organs and all of our glands. And that's our natural design. And for us to sustain that natural design, we need abundance and security. Our body needs security. That's because life needs security. We will not have like a regular ovulatory cycle if our body is undernourished and stressed out, because that's not safe for life. Our biological program needs security, and that's abundance of nutrient-dense food. Nutrient-dense food is the most nutrient-dense food is animal foods. Beef, liver, bone broth, eggs, cheese, natural yogurt, like foods that are really heavy in components that we need to build hormones. One of the main building blocks for estrogen and progesterone is cholesterol. We cannot make estrogen and progesterone if we don't have enough cholesterol. And then we're on this like female low carb or low calorie diets to be skinny and whatever shit. Sorry, but what we're creating a terrible situation because our body's all the time freaked out. And we're trying to be like, oh no, I'm just gonna have some vaporized broccoli for lunch, you know, and seeds. Yeah, but your biological program is freaked out and it's not safe. You need 3 eggs at breakfast with cheese, you know, and you need a big bowl of broth with meat and potato and herbs for lunch. You need like abundant food because that's what brings security to your body. Does that explain a little bit?
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Susie. I think it's just such a revolution for so many of us because we've been indoctrinated with this conditioning and programming of like low calorie, and all of the marketing around like health foods, but then you turn over the package and they have 50 ingredients and they're actually ultra processed foods. And the reason that they're being marketed as health foods is because they have all of these, vegetable oils and seed oils instead of like real fat. And I was definitely a victim to it when I was younger, and I see like family members of mine terrified of butter, like it's literally they're gonna have like 1 spoon of butter and it's gonna make them balloon up. But then instead, what are they having? Margarine, which is like so unnatural for the body. And I have kind of like this is something that we've spoken about previously, but I just want to ask in this forum as well, because there was a book that I read, and I know like at least a few people kind of like in my network, my friends have read it, called Fast Like a Girl. And it's by this woman, Mindy Peltz, and she's basically pushing this idea that we can use fasting and like even like very extended fasts up to like 3 days at certain moments in our cycle to support reproductive health. I'd love to kind of get your take on fasting for women, especially women who are experiencing this dysregulation and maybe trying to get pregnant and build that hormonal health in their bodies.
Mm-hmm. I haven't read the book. I know who it is, and I've heard like a few parts of the book. But what I know is that she's not an expert on reproductive health, and that's one way to like start also put criteria on what we take in as true, no? Because that's another issue of today. Everyone's an expert, and you just get on Instagram and you get like shitloads of videos of people who appear to know everything, and they don't really have the foundation. I think that might be an issue with this particular book, because there are times when fasting can be super important also as a woman. There are times, for example, if you have severe metabolic damage, or you have severe like gastrointestinal damage that you need to correct, then metabolic rest can be very, very important. But if you don't know how to fast, most people going to fast from an undernourished state, and that's only going to translate into more stress, because most of the problems that we have relate to undernourishment. And if we then go fasting, that's going to be triple the stress. I recommended fasting to some people at some very specific times, but I think it's very dangerous for us, especially as women in fertile age, to take it in as a regular practice, because of what our body needs is abundance and security. There may be specific times, yeah, of course, to clean out, detoxify. That's really important as well. But like going on this mindset that, okay, if I fast and I just like suffer, for 3 days, then I'm going to be well. That's actually just feeding something else in our mind. That's feeding like this path of path of health through suffering. It might work for some people at some time, but it might also be very dangerous. We need to be friends of our bodies. We need to be in love with our bodies. That's the only way that we can actually understand what it is that our bodies are saying. If we're there all the time, like with a whip, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, then you're just punishing yourself, I would go more for trying to work on a relationship with body and food that's from care, that when you wake up in the morning and you're going to prepare your breakfast, when you're there, like maybe chopping your onion and putting your eggs and whatever, that you actually think about how this food is going to nourish you, and have that mindset before eating. It's going to be much more healing than fast,
Yeah, totally. And I think it's like what I was saying before about all of the programming, especially as women, that we've received of like eating very little, and even just kind of these ideas that it's not like very womanly or feminine to like eat a lot or like eat a lot, it's just something that you just receive repeated so many times. So I love this message of kind of like focusing on nourishment and abundance, and that being the best way that we can take care of our bodies rather than punishing. Yeah, it's resonating a lot. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about the symptothermal method. It's something that I've been trying out with your support and guidance, and it's been really, really cool to start getting that data and understanding that like our bodies are giving us this data and this information all the time around our cycle and our reproductive health. So I'd love if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about what is this method, how does it work? And yeah, if perhaps somebody watching this is interested in taking it up, like how might they be able to start following this method to get all of that data from their body?
Absolutely. The symptothermal method is, I would say, it's the best way of managing reproductive choices as well. If we start there, like maybe if you're in a situation where you realize that taking endocrine disruptors is not very good for you, but then you don't want to become pregnant. Yeah. So then you don't get off them because you're scared to get pregnant, and then you might as well like ride out the depression and the bloating and the metabolic issues and whatever, because you don't want to become pregnant at the moment. That's many times that's the moment where the symptothermal method is like presented, if we have the luck to get to know it, because it's a super effective method that does no harm to your body, because it's based on knowledge. And it's a knowledge that we as women are extremely entitled to have, and that most women on an international scale have no access to. Like today, we're seeing a few more like intents to get the information to the women that need it. Still on a small scale, because most women are only presented the options of hormonal birth control. Hormonal birth control is not the only option to manage your reproductive choices. The best way is by knowledge. And to use the symptothermal method, you need to understand how your body functions. Because if you don't understand, then you're never going to be able to read your charts. What you do in the symptothermal method is a routine of observation, which is it's symptothermal. Symptom refers to symptom, and thermal refers to temperature. And those are the two main indicators of fertility that we have to understand in what moment we are about to ovulate, when we are fertile, when we have ovulated, and how our body adjusts to the different phases of the menstrual cycle. So the first step, really, which is also like the gift of this method, is that you have to study and understand your own body as a basis to be able to understand what it is that it's saying. So you can use the method for contraception very, very effectively. Actually, it's like 99.6% of efficiency when it's well used. But I would say what I usually use the method mostly for is not only contraceptive. It's for understanding and monitoring our events, because that's where we can observe and register all of the signs that our body language are actually like biochemical language are expressing throughout our cycle. So you do your routine of observation and registration of everything that you see from your body, and also you can expand this like a lot. You can also put in emotional changes and importantly put in like all kinds of different symptoms that may appear during your cycle. Like, for example, if you have a headache, or you're feeling really tired, or you get nauseous, or you're bloated, or you're farty, or whatever, you can also put it into your chart, and that's going to make sense, yeah, when you see it together with what's also happening hormonally. Basically, by the end of your cycle, if you've registered every day, you have a map of all of the hormonal changes that have occurred in your body. And that's a treasure, because no exam, no blood exam is going to show you that. If you go and get, for example, they sent so many times, they're like, okay, so let's do a blood test of estrogen and progesterone and cholesterol and thyroid hormones and whatever. That's, in the end, it's just a photo of a moment, you know, and the composition of our blood changes all of the time. And the fluctuations of hormones are like up and down, up and down. So it just depends on like, in what moment did you get the blood drawn out? You know, and usually it's not going to be very representative, because you have to do the exams like fasting in the morning, and you're stressed out, and then you came to the laboratory and then on the exam it shows up as if your hormones are like completely off grid, but that may not be true. Yeah? So we have to take a little bit also like careful mindset about blood exams and blood tests. Maybe super important at some moment, yes, but usually it makes no sense. It makes a lot more sense to see like all of the things that your body have manifested, because everything that happens hormonally in your body is going to have an expression. When your estrogen levels peak, you're going to have a different sensation in all of your body, especially in your vagina and your vulva. You're going to have mucus manifestations. You're going to have a cervix more open. You're going to have your breast bigger. You're going to have your skin clearer. You're going to have like all of these things that are expressions of hormone in your body. And when you get to the moment of ovulation, you are going to see a rise of temperature about 24 hours after. And based on that knowledge, when you see the entire map, you're not just seeing like, oh, day 15 of the cycle, I had my estrogen really high, you know. If you see the entire image, suddenly you understand other things about what's going on in your body. So what are the things that we usually detect in the first few charts that the the women who come to work with me realize. We see the balances or the imbalances. We see if you have a dominance of estrogen and lacking progesterone, which is a super, super common situation. It's really, really well, like most of the women who start charting will see that because of the imbalances that we have, of all the things that we've already mentioned. You know, it's difficult for the body to create a strong and potent ovulation, which is needed to sustain our luteal phase with enough progesterone. That requires a lot of nutrients. It requires a lot of rest. It requires a lot of time in ourselves, no? Because this is building blocks for life. That's a very, very common situation of the imbalance. Too much estrogen, too little progesterone. We also see clearly when the premenstrual symptoms start and what it relates to. We see if the temperature is usually on the lower scale or on the higher scale. And that's going to tell us a lot about our metabolic health and a lot about our thyroid health, which in turn talks about our adrenal health. So that's when we start reading the map, we suddenly get a lot of clues to where we need to start working in order to level things out. So, I mean, I work doing also like private consultations, and the people only tell me their symptoms. And I can go like, okay, based on your symptoms, I think we should start looking into this and liver health and intestinal health and whatever. But if I get the graph, the chart, it's no longer guesswork, because that's actually what the body has said. You know? So then we can be much more specific in what we need to do. And we read the chart and I go, okay, so we should start working on adrenal health. What do we do to work with adrenal health? We change things around. We change things around our stress management. We change our bedtime routine. We change our times of sleeping. We add certain plants. We add certain supplements. And that's going to be much more specific if we have the map of this specific body and what's going on in it.
Awesome. And so just to confirm, with this method, we're tracking temperature every morning and also looking at cervical mucus, and then if we can bring in those other symptoms as well.
The base is mucus symptoms, just like the cervical fluids, and the change in temperature. That's the basic, like the two feet of this method. Then depending on why we want to use it and how we want to use it and what we need, we bring in everything that's relevant to us.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm only just starting with this, but it's already been so interesting and useful for me. So anybody who's watching, who's considering, or who's just kind of like on this path of gaining understanding of your body, trying to achieve that balance, I would super recommend using this method. And Susie is an amazing person to guide you through it, because it's something that takes a lot of practice to kind of like get it right. And it's really helpful to have the guidance of somebody like Susie. So I'll just make that recommendation now.
Difficult. The thing is that it's systemized, you know? It's like you have to learn like a system to do it. And you have to understand the base of the manifestations. You have to understand how the process of ovulation happens. And you have to understand what happens after ovulation. You have to know a little bit about your own biological processes to understand what it is that you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like a few cycles of study, and then you grab the routine, you make it your own, and you start understanding how to read, and then it's your own tool, you know. Then you're never again going to question, like, am I fertile or not? Am I ovulating or not? And do I have hormonal imbalances or not? That's going to be personal knowledge of yours. And it's really like, as I said from the beginning, where imbalances in our body firstly show up is in our menstrual cycle. So it's also like to get a little bit ahead of ourselves. Because if we start seeing, maybe today you have a perfect 28-day cycle, you have no issues, your temperatures are perfect, and your bleeding is amazing or whatever. But then in 3-4 years, maybe something happens, you know? And you start seeing different patterns in your cycles. Then you are going to know that something's going on long before it turns into a pathologic event. Long before you go for a blood test and they say, oh my God, you have an autoimmune thyroid disorder. You're going to see that before, because your temperatures are going to show it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tool that you can use for so many things.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to continue with it. So we have 20 minutes left. I'd love to open up for questions. If anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hand or post it in the chat. I'll start us off with one question that came from somebody who is going to be catching the recording. And yeah, she's not here to be able to be here live, but she was really wondering about how to control food cravings at certain points in her cycle. I'm guessing in the premenstrual phase. Probably a lot of people can identify with like the sugar cravings, the carbohydrate cravings, you know, just like feeling like you could eat all day. I'm in that moment right now in my luteal phase. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for women who experience this?
Yeah, of course. First, you have to look into what type of cravings there are, because it's different. Like, it depends on different processes in your body. If you have cravings for sweets, or if you have cravings for salty, like carbohydrate food. Those are the most usual, common, and they're different backgrounds and different things that are going on, different processes that are going on in the body. So first, you would have to look into that. And second, you would have to understand that your body's craving because it needs something. Just that our mind translates into the fastest option because we're used to it. And your cells are used to like asking for energy. The most quick option to get energy for the cells, it's like sugar, you know. But really, what the body's asking for is energy. It's building blocks. It's nutrition. So I would say, whatever type of craving that you might be having, it's always a good option to go into more nutrient dense food routine, because if you actually supply all of the needs, like if you supply all of the nutrition that your body needs, then your body's not going to be screaming for energy. So in your premenstrual phase, for example, you need more food, but you don't need more chocolate. You need more like meat, eggs, liver, butter. You know, you need more nutrient dense food. And try to break through the illusion that's also, it's chemical. It's completely chemical. It depends a lot on the fluctuations of glucose and insulin in our blood. One great, like, super easy way to start controlling the fluctuations of glucose and insulin in your blood is to change your breakfast. Because also these beautiful Western diets were like, okay, so I wake up in the morning and I have a toast and coffee, for example, or you have a huge bowl of fruit or sandwich, and all of these like sweet and starchy foods that are going to spike your insulin. If you spike your insulin in the first hours of the morning, then your blood sugar levels are going to be like this all day. And then you're going to be tired, and then you need to eat something, and then you're going to be tired again, and then you want chocolate, and then you're tired again, and then you need a sandwich. And that's the way that you put you plant this in the morning if you spike your insulin at the first hour. So the like super easy solution, have a protein and fat-based breakfast. Have 3 eggs with avocado and cheese. And that's going to maintain your blood sugar level so much more stable throughout the day. And it's instant. It's the same day as you make the change, you see the difference. So that would be one good recommendation.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just going to type in the chat Glucose Goddess, who is an amazing resource for this information about the glucose spikes, which again, this is information that like so many of us, we don't even realize. And like you said, just kind of making those decisions in the beginning of your day about what you eat can have such a huge impact on so many different aspects of like how the rest of your day goes, not just cravings, but mood as well, because there's a huge link between glucose and insulin sensitivity and mood. It's huge.
It also relates so much to your microbiome. Because really, when we get cravings, the one who's screaming for their food are the bacteria and the yeast that eat that food. So we have a really like starchy and carbohydrate dense and sugary diet. We're going to have a huge growth of yeast in our intestines, for example. That may be like Candida albicans, which is one of the most like famous inhabitants in there. The leg of sugar, and these guys, they want to eat. If there are many, they're gonna scream loudly, and that translates into cravings. So if you have your gut full of bacteria and yeast screaming for sugar and bread and cookies and whatever, then your mind is going to interpret that voice and it's going to express it, like as if it would be your need. It's not your need, it's the imbalance of your microbiome. There's also a path to go down to try to like regulate your microbiome. You have a lot of different people in there who need different types of food. We have bacteria who need protein. You have bacteria who needs, fibers and different components. And if you don't feed them, they're going to die off. And then the other guys are going to take their place. And they're going to scream a lot louder for what they need.
Yeah, and so, I mean, just quickly, what kind of foods would you advise people introduce into their diet to support microbiome health?
Yeah, the nutrient dense, like animal foods, natural ferments, like natural yogurt, good yogurt, okay, full fat, like hopefully locally made, not pasteurized. Raw milk, fibers, of course, like different types of vegetables. Yeah, those are the main, like fats, proteins, and fibers.
Awesome, thank you.
Ferments.
Does anybody else have any questions for Susie? Feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat. If you want to ask
I have a question,
go ahead,
Max. Yeah, I was going to ask a question about pain, because over the last few years I've been tracking my periods and not been on any contraception or anything, and it's been going really well, and I've really loved getting to know my body. Basically, everything you've been talking about has just been super interesting. But still on the first day of my period, I just get a lot of pain, and I think something over the years, like I used to take a pill for it and kind of be like, okay, I'll be fine, like blah, blah. And then I would say even very recently over the last year, I've been like, right, I'm refusing to take this pill. I really just want to like feel it and take more time to rest, etc. But sometimes just the first day is really painful, and after that, it's absolutely fine. I used eucalyptus, which actually I was told I shouldn't use because it's quite like harsh for when you're on your period. But like even like using eucalyptus like directly like a spray, I have breathing it in or like putting it directly on my belly kind of helps. Or like canela, like a tea of canela also is really helpful. So those two things have kind of helped for me, but I wondered if there was anything else you would recommend.
Yes. I mean, first, we understand something about menstrual cramps and pain. We have the menstrual event and the ovulatory event are natural inflammatory events in the body. To be able to menstruate, your body will create a slight inflammation because the endometrium is going to get loose from the uterine walls, and that is an inflammatory event in itself. What happens when so it's normal, you can say, to have like a slight cramp. You can say I feel it. But if it's more painful, like shit, it's really painful, I need something to get me off the pain, then that tells us that the inflammatory event is being a bit bigger than it should be. And why does that happen? Because there's inflammation in the body. Because if you have almost all people do also some degree of inflammation, you have a higher degree of inflammation constantly, chronically, then you're going to have a larger response to inflammation because you already have a production of anti-inflammatory and inflammatory agents in your blood. So the best way to handle menstrual cramps is to identify where the root of inflammation is. Many times it's in the intestine. Other times it might be in the liver. And in other places, of course, as well. If we try to use the symptoms to identify where the root of inflammation is, and use not only during the days of pain, but as a routine and habit in your life, to use tools to support the inflammatory response, to bring down inflammation, the level of chronic inflammation that you have in your body. And there are a lot of options. Of course, the first one is going to be like, the use of the habits of food and nutrition, but also to maybe install a routine of having cycles of plants, anti-inflammatory teas. Not only when it's painful, during all of your cycle, you can alternate different herbs. For example, and there's so many anti-inflammatory herbs that are really good for bringing down inflammation. You can use, for example, as you said, cinnamon, canela. You can use ginger and turmeric. You can use it's called rosemary. You can use calendula. So many different ones that, depending a little bit on where we identify the roots of inflammation, you would use different plants as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susie. That was so useful. Definitely going to take a note of those plants. Questions? Or if anybody just wants to share something, maybe not a question, but just a reflection, please feel free. I think we can probably wrap things up then if there's nothing else. Thank you so much, Susie. This was absolutely amazing. So informative, so useful. Thank you so much for the time and sharing all of your wisdom. with our community. If people want to reach out to you, I'm guessing your Instagram, which I'm going to share the link to in the chat. We'll also send this out in the email for those people watching the recording. This is Susie's Instagram, and then also I'll share your website. And yeah, just to let you guys know, with Colibri Garden, which I'll share the website, those of you who don't know us, as I mentioned in the beginning, we run retreats and ceremonies. We actually have a San Pedro Wachuma ceremony coming up with Susie and her partner Jue. I think that's going to be on the 17th of August. So anybody who is around or in Medellin, feel free to reach out to us and we can give you some more information about attending the ceremony, which is going to be super beautiful. And then we also have a retreat with Jahe Ayahuasca from the 22nd to the 26th of August as well. So anybody who's interested in coming and drinking medicine for, it's going to be 2 ceremonies over 4 days up here in Santa Elena as well. Please feel free to reach out. You can contact me or Ivilo. Really, really grateful for everybody coming and being part of this webinar.
Thank you.
And yeah, hopefully this information was useful for you. I'm sure it was. I see Ivilo coming back in. Ivilo, do you want to share any parting words?
I just wanted to say that the San Pedro ceremonies are gonna be on the 9th of
we changed again?
Of August. Yeah, we decided to change.
Okay.
And yeah, it's very. So I just want to say something very quick. Just learning a little bit more about the effects of the pill on the women's system. I really encouraged my ex-partner to look into this, and I want to encourage all of you ladies here on this call tonight to just learn more about the natural ways to regulate your cycle, learn more about your bodies, and just cannot recommend highly enough our beautiful sister Susie. And yeah, if you feel like learning more and going deeper, get in contact, and I'm sure you won't regret it.
Absolutely.
I'm here for whatever you need. Private consultations, if you want to learn the symptothermal method, if you want to get in on this treasure, I'm here for what you need. Just let me know.
Amazing. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
And I just
Susie.
think that like seeing your beautiful family and your daughters on this call is just like a perfect manifestation of all of this work that you've done around your fertility and the health of your reproductive system. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for being here. Hope you have a lovely
Thank you,
rest of the
Max,
day.
for hosting as always.
Thank
And some
you.
wonderful questions.
Awesome. All right. Well, blessings everybody.
Thank
See
you.
you soon. Thank
Ciao.
you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.